Hi everyone, this is Kevin with My Shop Assist again. In this video, I'm going to go over how tasks are used and created in My Shop Assist. Tasks are essentially going to be like the services that you offer on a vehicle or things that you're going to be doing to a project. And we have every job inside of My Shop Assist is where you would be putting tasks. We have a couple different things that you should know before I kind of get going into this. We have a shop task list and a job task list. And the shop task is going to be essentially the database that you have created as you go of what services or tasks that you do offer. And then each individual job pulls from that list. And then once they are inside of a job, we call them job tasks. And while they pull from, they basically copy from your shop task database, you are able to edit them inside of a job and they don't affect the shop task unless you want to. So that's the first important thing to know. So there's a shop task and a job task. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and make a task. So if we add task, let's say we're going to add windows to this carriage. Inside of a task, you have several different things. So we have a description, we have notes, estimated hours, pricing, hourly rate, whether or not it's taxed, if you're going to show it on a work order or not. Update shop task is a flag I'll explain later. And you have checklists and you have parts. So in this example, the description is going to be customer visible, and you also can have notes. For estimated hours, you are usually going to put what you think it's going to take you to do. And then you have different pricing structures. So hourly, fixed, book hours, or none. Hourly is going to go straight off what you have actually recorded using the timers. Fixed rate is just going to be quantity one on a work order, and it's going to be whatever you put in for the cost. And book hours is going to use the estimated hours for the quantity. So in this case, it would be 5 multiplied by $150 per hour. I'm going to start with hourly just so you can see that as we do this. So this is a new task. I didn't pull it from the list that dropped down when I started typing. This is a new task. It never existed. Once I hit save, inside of this job, it's going to add this task to the job, as well as adding it to the shop task database. So your shop will have this task in it moving forward. So you save it, and now we have window replacement. So what I mean by a shop task versus a job task is, if we add another task in here and type window replacement, you'll see that this task comes back up again. And the window replacement task, because we added it to the database, we can now use it again and again and again moving forward. So basically, once you've added something, it's going to be in there. You can also pull from the database of stuff that's already in there. So if I pull up one of my existing tunes, so like tuning is a common thing I do. So maybe I'm going to do a flex fuel on an Evo 10. Hit save. It's already got my estimated hours and the pricing and everything already in it. So I just pulled that from the shop database to make it a job task. So that's the two easy ways to add tasks to a job, as well as one way to add that task to your shop task database. There are a couple other ways you can add tasks to the shop list. The first one, and probably the more common one, is if you're using QuickBooks or you have already been using QuickBooks, you can sync this to your QuickBooks. So if you go to the shop settings and go to the sixth tab over, this is your QuickBooks Online list. You can sync this to QuickBooks Online, so I'm already connected to it. And once you are connected, you can click any of these buttons on the bottom and it will pull that information from your QuickBooks into your MSA. So like if I were to click this import tasks, it would pull all your services in QuickBooks into your My Shop Assist database. That's the easiest way to get started. If you're using QuickBooks Online already and you want to get into MSA, just start syncing all these. So the customers, parts, tasks, that will pull that information from QuickBooks into your MSA. Great way to get going. Second, we have a tab over here called Tasks. This is going to be your task database. You can import a CSV file or Excel file in here by clicking this button here. I have a template for it, so this is actually going to go to an older version of MSA to load it in. But basically, you will upload your file in here. You'll use first row as headers usually, and then once you do that, you will match up the headers for it. And I have a sample Excel file right here, that you can follow. So you can download this file right here and then put your data into it, or modify your data to match this XLS file. And that's the easiest way to do it. It doesn't have to match the XLS file. Once you have uploaded a file in here, you can just match the headers for it. So this right here is going to, since I'm still looking at the task list, this is my list of tasks for the shop. So one thing I recommend is once you get started adding tasks for your shop in MSA is to follow kind of a naming convention that's easy to use, easy for your people to remember, and it has to do two things. One, it has to be somewhat descriptive of what you're going to be doing, but not be generic enough that everything falls into the same one. So there are shops that just use labor or service, just a generic labor for everything, and then they wind up having to type in the description for everything. It's a lot of extra work doing it that way. I don't recommend it because it also limits you on what you can find out with the reports. So we have a lot of really cool reports that can use these unique task names, but if you use labor for everything, then you won't be able to do that. It's just all going to be under labor. Your estimated hours are all going to be wacky. For every single job, it'll be different. If what you do is unique on every single job, then sure, that might be the answer to doing it. But I think you'll find most shops do a lot of repetitive work, like brake rotors, oil change, transmission fluid flush. All that sort of stuff is going to be pretty repetitive, and you can just add it as a single task, naming it something like rear diff install, mustache bar delete. I've got a battery install, and I've got 8 different pages of stuff in here. So clutch installs for the 3 various cars that I've got. Clutch line install, clutch master cylinder install. So you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing with this naming convention that I've used. If you are like me, where you are very specific and you can work on pretty much one type of car only, it's really easy to build this list. If you work on a variety of cars, you have to have a little more thought into it, such as naming it like BMW 3 Series, lug nut install, BMW 3 Series control arm bushing replacement. You can kind of name it however you are working on and whatever you're doing. So if you do a lot of fab work, like you can go in and I think if you do a lot of fab work, you might have a whole bunch in here where you're doing ceramic coating, blow-off valve, flange welding, bead rolling, anodizing, whatever you're doing with fab, you can make this sort of stuff as well. So you get the idea of what I'm doing with this naming conventions in here. Additionally, you can, from this list, you can tax things as well. So if you need to add tax to your services, or if you want to deactivate something, if something you don't ever do, you want to remove it from your list, like sound deadening removal, you just click the little active button and it will remove it from your list. You can always go back and find it by clicking this active only and search again, and then it will show you everything you've ever had. So I have a lot of stuff that I've disabled over the years that I don't use any longer because I like to keep my list clean and easy to follow. So that's the task list. If you ever need to export your list, you can export it with this button. It will make it a CSV or Excel file for you as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my job. So now that I'm back into the job here and I'm looking at the 2 tasks I have for this job, the first thing that's going to be most obvious is you're going to be running timers for this stuff. So if you hit a start timer, it's going to track your time on it. It should be the most common thing you're doing to these tasks. Every technician that's working on something should be tracking hours. That is how you get the most value out of the system, is tracking hours on everything and then using the reports to learn what you need to charge more for, who needs to be working on different stuff, who's not efficient, who is efficient. That's the kind of stuff you get when you actually track hours on this. If you're not doing it, you're definitely missing out on a lot of value from your shop. And almost certainly, I guarantee you're going to be undercharging basically every customer you have. When you are tracking hours, you can always click on this little button here and it will show you a list of the time entries you have. So in this case, if I click the down arrow, the only entry for this one is myself so far. I started it, 10 minutes ago or 1 minute ago, and it hasn't ended yet. So it's just going to keep incrementing as we go. If you were to complete a job or complete a task, you just click the complete button and it will gray it out. And that's how you know that a task has been completed. If you want to keep editing inside of a task, you can click on the name of the task and it will expand it out. And you can also do a couple things directly from here. So if you needed to add a part to a task, or if you wanted to add comments. Okay, so we've got comments and we've got parts, but if we click the name, you also see we've got the description that we normally would use, and we have the not customer visible notes right here. You can also create checklists in here, so if you need to do things like there, so you got some checklist items you can have, and as you go through these jobs, you can mark the checklist as completed. The checklists are really meant for smaller checks. You're not wanting to record hours on these specifically because they're too small of a task, but it's part of a bigger task. So in this case, the window replacement, obviously you need to remove the old one, put the new one in, and then check to make sure everything is good. So that's kind of an example of what you do with the checklist. So the master task here, window replacement, involves doing these three things, and you can check them off as you go. A good example that I have built into this already is the short block assemblies. If I go into this task and I'll add it, I've got a checklist in here. So installing the piston squirters, chasing the main stud holes to make sure they're clean, chasing the oil pan bolt holes to make sure they're clean, checking the oil galley plugs, and chasing the head stud holes. Like, some of this stuff is like super obvious, but like when you've done a lot of cars over the years, you've made dumb mistakes. And like one of them, for example, was forgetting to put an oil galley plug in. And normally that's done at the machine shop for me, but I didn't check it. And you put a car together and you start it up in oil, the oil's pissing out of the back of the block. So that's the kind of thing that if you have a little checklist thing here, you just mark it off when you've checked it. Even if you didn't have to do anything, you just mark it off as been checked. I'm going to save this in here. And you can see this task also has a much bigger description that I use for putting all my engine clearances as I go. So also inside of these, you can add pictures. So at the bottom here, you have photos and files. So if I need to upload a picture, you would just select it from the computer. If you're on a phone, you can use it as, you can select it from your camera reel as well, or take pictures directly from the camera as well. I mentioned it earlier that I have descriptions and notes. One thing to know about this is, like I said earlier, is the description is it is customer visible, but the notes are not. What that means is if the customer to log in online and view this job, they will be able to see the description, but they will not be able to see these notes. Additionally, the notes do not make it onto an invoice or work order. Only the description will. You can also optionally include the checklist items and the comments, and obviously the parts will appear as well. If you need to edit the pricing of a task, you can click the pencil, and you can change anything in here that you would want, such as the pricing structure, the estimated hours, the hourly rate. If you need to permanently make these changes, like an example would be, let's say we find out every time we do these window replacements, it really takes us about 6.5 hours. So you want to make your estimated hours 7. If you update the shop task, that will send this change to your shop task database. So basically it's updating it in the back end. So the next time you pull this task forward into a job, it will have the 7-hour estimated. So we'll go ahead and save that. One of the more advanced features we have with the tasks is that you can make groups of tasks. And you can do that from the task database here. So let's say, for example, when we do a brake pad install, we also want to include the brake pads in the task. So if you edit this task, you can see down here we have a parts right here. So if we click add parts, maybe we're going to use some Hawk HPS pads. And then maybe we're also going to use the Hawk HPS front pads. So now in this task, I have both the front and the rear pads attached to it. So I can save this and go back to my job and add that task. Brake pad install. You'll see it already has the parts included in it. So if I add this to the job, it will have both the parts attached to it. Further, we can take that a step further with the groups. So let's say when we're doing brake rotors, we always want to do the brake pads as well. So up along the top here, there's a subtask button. We can go ahead and search for brake pads install, which has the pads already included in it, and we can hit save. I'm actually going to go into the brake rotors, and I'm going to edit it again. And I'm going to include some rotors on this as well. So we have subtask, and we're going to add a rotors. We'll do the front rotors. We need 2 of these. Hit save. And we need the rear rotors. We need 2 of these. And we hit save. So we save this again. So now when we add that brake rotor task to a job, so let me go back to my job. If I add a task for brake rotors, you can see that it's got both the rotors that we attached, and it also has this brake pad install as well. So I expanded it out and you got the pads in here. So when I save this, we're now going to have brake rotors with the rotors, and we're going to have another brake pad install task with the parts for it. So you can see you can build groups and assemblies essentially with this. So it works out really well when you're doing a lot of repetitive stuff, such as like engine builds. And a good example is this when I've built out some really extensive ones. So if I've got group Evo 89 long block install, I have the oil pump, the oil strainer, the brake and oil, transmission fluid, the gaskets, head studs, oil pan. I've got all the disassembly, the removal, the install, the assembly, a valve job, and ultrasonic cleaning for everything. So I've got a big group of tasks in here, and that makes it very easy for me to give quotes on how to do an engine install. Likewise, I've got another one for short blocks. So if I go to my Evo Dynamics 4G63, I've already got the main studs, the washer or the bearings, the pistons, the rods. I've got all the machining steps in here, the assembly, and ceramic coating for the pistons. So I've got all this built into a group here, so it's very easy for me to give a quote, and the quote stays up to date because if I update the price on any of these parts, it also updates the price in the group. So you can see this job has gotten really big with only a couple of additions of stuff. And it's easy to follow the steps and how far along you are. You can document who's done what. You can track hours on all this stuff. And that is how you're going to make the most effective use of tracking jobs and what you're supposed to be doing to them. The last thing I want to show you is what we call default tasks. So if I go back to my task list and I'm going to pick one of these, we will do brake pad install again. I'm going to edit this. And we have a checkbox called Common Task. So if you click this Common Task button and hit Save, when you are creating a job, so if I go back to the jobs list and create a new job, we'll do it for Ben Franklin again. Inside of this step, the details step, we have Add Common Tasks. So if I expand this down, I now have my brakes pad install here. And you just click it and it'll automatically add it to the job from here. And I've got a bunch of them that I use pretty quite often. Most of them are related to tuning. And so any of that stuff, you can just click it and we can create the task. And now we've got a job with the brake pads already on here. So if you're doing something quite often, like let's say you're a Corvette shop and you install cams on basically everything that comes in, you can make a default task for the cam install, include the parts, include any oil or bearings that you have to include in it, and just add that task from the start of it, and you've got the job built before you've even really gone into the job. So it's very quick and easy to do. Our goal is always to make it so it's super fast to add stuff to jobs. So just click Add Task, type whatever it is, pick which one you want, and hit Save. And that's really it. Like I said, when you get started at the beginning, your list is going to be blank, so you're going to have to type a lot of them in to get going. But once you've added a couple of them, you can kind of get a feel for how easy it is to do. And that's really the goal, is getting over the hurdle of getting your database kind of built up a little bit, and then it's super fast moving forward after that. That's really it. If you have any questions, just give me a shout. You can email us or call us, and you can also message us through the MSA chat system. All right, thanks.